Okay, so I wanted to build a swing set, and the swing set is going to be fairly simple. I couldn't find any good plans on the internet, so I had to make do with my own ingenuity. I'm going to have some A-shaped side pieces, and you can see all the measurements here. At the end of the day, the swing was roughly 11 feet tall from the bottom of the ground to or I guess from the top of the ground to the bottom of the top, which makes for a nice long swing. So you've got the leg pieces, the horizontal cross piece, vertical cross piece, and the legs meet at 45 degrees. So that makes a 22.5 degree angle between the vertical piece and each of the legs. And you can see the measurements shown here. When you look at it from the front, you've got the 45-degree braces that keep it from racking from side to side. Those are set 2 feet from the legs. And then I spaced the swings out based on some measurements that I found online with about 16 inches between each of the swings. Like I said, it's about 11 feet from the ground and about 12 feet in total length from end to end. Now, there isn't much on the internet as far as plans for something like this, so I've put all the measurements and all the angles and stuff on this quick drawing here, so you can slow it down and get all the measurements that you actually need in order to replicate this if you wanted to build something like it in your own backyard. I'll put a shopping list in the description. Now, whenever I'm cutting mortises, I always try to lay them out very carefully. The one that I'm drawing here is the 45-degree mortise for the brace that's going to keep the whole thing from racking from side to side if it gets pushed on. So I always try and lay it out all the way across, especially when you're going at it at an angle. So this mortise is at 45 degrees, and I want to be sure that I measure everything right and do everything like I'm supposed to. So I've calculated exactly where it goes, and now I'm laying it out. I'm tracing it all in pencil here so that you can see, but the thing here is to make sure to get the mortise width right so that you can actually fit your tenon in it. In this case, I'm using 2-inch mortises and 2-inch tenons. And so I've laid it out here, and the next step is to drill it out. The thing about drilling this thing out is that you want to be really careful that you drill in the right direction. The main thing is that it's real easy to accidentally drill the wrong way. So drawing those lines on the side really is helpful when it comes to actually making sure you don't screw something up here. I'm just trying to hog out a ton of material. And then I use a router to clean out even more. Here I'm using a plunge router, and I just start out fairly shallow and then lower it as I go. And since the mortise is at an angle here, you have to be real careful not to accidentally dig into the place where the mortise angles down. So I'm going to do this on both sides. Now there's 1,000 videos on YouTube about how to dig mortises. This one's at an angle, so I put a guide on there so that I could get through it more easily. At the end of the day here, we're just trying to hog out a whole bunch of material. And there's lots of ways to do it, but the trick is to go slow, not try to rush it. I do have some extra long chisels, which are really helpful for doing this kind of a deep mortise. I've got a 1-inch and a 2-inch chisel that are both really long, made for timber framing. The key thing here is that you want to hog out most of that material before you start going up to the edge of your mortise. So if you're not careful, then you'll actually move that line, move the edge of that line. Yeah, I'm sorry about the focus, but you want to get close to the line with mortises and with a chisel before you actually start hogging out all this material here. And then once you have it roughly where you want it, then you can go in with the chisel and get it right up against that line to get the mortise exactly the size that you need it. So that's the basic process that you want to go through there. Of course, you have to repeat this on both sides, and you don't want to kind of punch through the bottom. Otherwise, you'll make a nice ugly edge. You'll chip it out on the other side. But for timber framing, the exact size of the mortise isn't super important. Here we're just trying to clean out the material and make it fit. But if you're careful, you can get it pretty close to the size you actually want it. That way you can fit your tenon in without having too much trouble. The last step here, you notice how close I've gotten there to the pencil line on the right side of that mortise. I haven't actually gone up to it. So once I'm close, see now I'm going up right at that pencil line, and I'm making a nice sharp edge so that when I come through on the other side, I don't have any chip out or anything like that. Now I'm going to lay out the tenon, and so this is on a six, the actual brace, the actual 45-degree brace, and you can see I haven't actually cut it to length yet, but I'm just going to use a skill saw, and I'm going to just cut out the sides of this mortise now, or this tenon. Now I've been careful to put the depth of my blade at the right angle, so that I don't have a problem with depth. Then I'm going to use the blade of my chisel as a guide for making sure the tenon is the right size. And I'll just use my skill saw to start the cut on the cheeks of that tenon. And I'll just go right up to that line. You got to be careful with the angle so that you're not actually cutting into the post beyond the shoulder of your tenon when it's at an angle like this. But here it's fine. It's a 45-degree angle and it turns out to be no problem. So I'm going to use the chisel there just as the guide for showing me exactly how wide my tenon should be, and then just cut down on either side. And this is just going to make it much easier to break out that tenon so I don't have to do a ton of sawing. And this part is really fun. You just take a hammer and you beat on these pieces and they fall right off. And then your job is to take a chisel and just clean up that cheek face so that it's nice and smooth and flat. And the chisel can be a good guide for what flat really means there. Coming from both sides makes it real easy. It's important to have a nice sharp chisel. That makes this this digging out, this flattening, much easier. Also, the super long chisel is really nice. Just from the other side, breaking out the rest, trying to get the camera to focus. I'm just going to go in here and just clean this up so that it's nice and flat. Doesn't have to be perfect, especially for timber framing. I should note that this is a really good opportunity to let the kids help. Sawing is a nice, safe thing, and letting them get in on the fun is great. It's a great time to be together. Now, it turned out that it was quite a pain to get these things put together, partly because I suck at digging mortises, and there were a lot of adjustments that needed to be done on, particularly on these side posts. So you can see here, we're just putting together the legs on the sides. This is the first side, and things aren't fitting, so we're having to adjust a bit to try to get them together. We finally decided that it was going to be better to put it together upright instead of laying it flat on the ground. But once you get everything to fit, then it slides together pretty easily. But you can see here we had to make a bunch of corrections. That's sort of par for the course, I guess. Mortises that got made later in this project tended to be a lot better fitting than the ones that got made earlier in this project, which makes me think that maybe I'm getting better at this. But finally we got it all put together, and we used some clamps and this come along to pull the joint tight, and then started putting together the second one. That one went together a lot easier because we kind of knew what we were doing and knew what to expect. My mortises were a bit too thin, and my tenons were too thick, one or the other. But we've done it enough times that it started to be a lot easier for the second one, and we finally got it put together as well. And those come-alongs really did the trick for getting everything to squeeze together. And everybody wanted to get on the action, so we had a couple of wives come in and help us drill a bit. And of course you can see all the kids standing around playing, but we finally got it together, and it's super sturdy. So that was great. Then came the arduous process of getting everything square. And so this was mostly just knowing the dimensions and making sure it was parallel to the house, and also kind of laying everything out and getting a rough idea of where we wanted the holes to be for the footing. You'll notice the ground is definitely not level. So we also had to make sure that we were able to get the footings dug to the same depth. This next part was really crazy. We rented an auger from the local big box store, and this was the first time any of us had ever used it. So we finally figured out how it works and got started digging down where the holes were. Now I think that the auger must have walked side to side a bit as we did it, because we spent a ton of time trying to get things square, but then nothing was actually exactly where we wanted it at the end of the day. So we had some adjustments to make, but we had to kind of wing it a bit. So I guess the lesson here is it's not super important to get everything 100% correct, because unless you're a pro at working these augers, things are going to move on you anyway. Well, at this point, we've been at it for quite a long time, and you can see we've got lots of help, but you can also see the shadow creeping across the lawn there to give you some insight into how long this is taking. But basically, we just mixed up some Quikrete and then used a string level to make sure that we were filling up those holes to the same, so that they were both at the same level, so that when we put the swing down on top of them, the swing itself would be level. So then we had to get everything into place, and we just walked it over. Sadly, we lost a little bit of footage here, unreliable iPhones. Got the top piece put on, and then called over the troops to come and help us stand the thing up. So we lowered it onto the braces that we had set into the concrete when we poured it, and then moved everything and adjusted and got everything to fit. And amazingly, everything went exactly where it was supposed to go. So that's a minor miracle that this thing actually fit where we expected it to go. We put nylon tubing around the chain so that it wouldn't hurt little fingers. This is climbing. I found it on a climbing website, but it's essentially 2-inch nylon tube around this heavy-duty chain. Which is just sturdy and heavy and strong, and looks really good. So hopefully it'll keep everybody's fingers from getting pinched. And you can see us attaching the swing sets, and we're adjusting them to make sure that these guys can get on by themselves without needing help. And then we're using these bolt cutters here to cut off the excess chain. So these are custom fit to tiny little bottoms. And then we had to give it a go. So the happy customers seem to be enjoying swinging.
Good or more? More, okay.
It's great to see them using it, and it is absolutely sturdy. It's sturdy as a rock. Big thanks to everybody that helped here. My father-in-law is in on this action. My brother-in-law. This is his place and his kiddos, so it's great to get to see them using it. And then, of course, Dad had to get some action here, and he really put this thing through the paces. So it wasn't too long before he was practically in orbit with this swing set. So he definitely tested it out to make sure it was stable.
He's an animal. Look at this guy. Tom, you're freaking me out, man.
This thing isn't even wiggling.
Hey, Nana, we got a trampoline too.
I know, isn't it exciting?
I don't even want to look at what you're doing right now.
I told Amy, if the bottom part that's in the ground rots,
Jeremy,
this
you're
big
gonna
enough,
flip it
you
over.
just cut that off and still have plenty big enough swing.
That thing is not moving at all.
No.
It's not moving.
You said sturdy.
He said sturdy.
I did, and you delivered.
You could throw a
Stakeholders happy. I can't believe you're doing that. That's madness.
Okay, let me take a video, baby.
Hey, will you close the door? You're letting all the heat out there, Mike.
Wow. You did it, Greg.
This is great. Good job, Greg. I think it might be starting to rain or sleet.
Yep. Y'all got it done right on time.
I feel it
there.
too. Let's see the raindrops.
Careful.
And the sleet has come. Right when we get it done. Literally.
What can we
sleet.
help you pick up before it starts raining?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you don't need to do any of that. Thank you for lunch.
You're welcome. Do you have a tool?